Most agency owners think exit means one thing, finding an external buyer. But what if that's not the only path? What if one of the most overlooked ways to exit an agency is not through an external sale at all, but through internal succession, through trust, mentorship, leadership, and a gradual transition over time? In today's episode, I'm joined by Daniel Pillai, CEO of Langton PR, and we talk about a very different kind of exit story. In this conversation, you hear what agency owners may be missing when they overlook internal succession, why leadership development is such an important part of planning for the future of your business, and what it can look like to grow someone into greater responsibility over time. We also talk about the inner side of transition, the self-doubt, trust, readiness, and leadership it takes to build something another person can actually step into. If exit or legacy has been on your mind, whether now or years from now, this episode will give you a broader perspective on what is possible. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you want to grow an agency to 7 figures and beyond without working more hours in your business, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Audrey Joy Kwan. I know what it takes to build an agency, including supporting an agency owner in selling and exiting. I also have a master's degree in communications, specializing in organizational development. My team and I have worked behind the scenes of multiple 7-figure agencies and have coached and consulted with over 150 agency owners. All this to say, when you join us on the Small But Mighty Agency podcast, you get real-world experience and practical tips that help you work less, earn more, and lead with integrity. So let's go. Hey friends, today's conversation is about something we don't talk about enough in the agency world. When agency owners think about exiting, most assume the only path is an external sale. But what if that's not the only way? What if transition doesn't have to mean handing your company to a stranger? What if it can mean stewardship instead of transaction? Today, I'm joined by Daniel, CEO of Langton PR. Daniel brings over 15 years of experience at the intersection of traditional media and modern digital storytelling. He began his career in front of the camera as an entertainment journalist before he went behind the scenes, shaping brands into bold, visible moments. But the reason I invited Daniel isn't just because he's a PR powerhouse, it's because of how he became CEO. Now, Daniel didn't acquire his agency through a traditional buyout. He transitioned into sole ownership through a gradual trust-based handoff from the previous owner, someone who saw his leadership potential early and intentionally developed it over time. Today, we talk about moving from account manager to owner. We talk about mentorship, succession planning, and the internal work of stepping into leadership. We talk about self-doubt, identity, and what it means to lead as a person of color in this industry. And we explore a different kind of exit story, one built on belief, partnership, and long-term vision. If you're a small but mighty agency owner thinking about legacy, internal succession, or how to design your agency so it can outlast you, this conversation will expand what's possible. Let's get into it. Daniel, it is amazing to have you here. Take us back to the beginning. When you were a senior account manager, did you ever imagine you'd one day own the agency?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Audrey. Your introduction was so powerful. Sometimes, I had to take a moment just to be like, wow, that really was a situation. So I'm grateful for the opportunity and platform. Thank you. But to go back, no, I never believed I could ever own a business. And it's interesting, and it had nothing to do with PR. It had everything to do with being the child of immigrants to Canada. My parents are South Indians from the Fiji Islands. They immigrated in the 70s and 80s. So I was just taught to work for the big boss, Caucasian. They knew what they were doing. They were always meant to be in power, and it was our job to serve them. So I didn't realize how ingrained that mentality was for me. So no, I didn't believe I could ever own a business. So when the opportunity came, I didn't know how to accept it, in all honesty.
You stepped into an agency as a account manager.
Mhm.
And why agency life in the first place? Why account management?
So I was hired actually as a digital media manager. So it wasn't even managing accounts. I was trying to help the agency sort of navigate the intersect between traditional and now content creation and digital programming. Like it was a big boom, like in 2015, 2016. A lot of magazines had just shut down. Everyone was kind of discovering the new way forward. And now there was a group of bloggers and, content creators that were out there. So I was hired to navigate that. I ended up in account management when people who were at the agency for 10 plus years were now finding themselves in different areas in their life and different areas of their professional journeys. So out of necessity, you know how agency life is, out of necessity, I was transitioned to accounts. I was ready to take it on. I asked for it. I offered myself there because I thought I could do it. And then I went into account management and I saw it as customer service. Like I in my mind knew I could learn what needed to be learned. I knew that I could fake it till I could make it. I knew that I could get away with a lot if I allowed people to feel good about what they were doing. I allowed them to trust me, and then I'd be able to achieve my goals. So, did I know anything about PR? Absolutely not. But I saw account management as customer service, and that's what my mindset was at that time. And I was a former TV personality. So, I'm coming from a very traditional world. And PR for me at that time was a unilateral move. I was going to maintain the relationships I had in broadcast television, maybe find myself back in broadcast television because that was the hope at the time. And I didn't understand that the longevity would come from public relations. I just didn't see it because I wasn't searching for it. So, yeah.
I think that's how a lot of people stumble into the agency world, whether it's owning an agency or working in an agency. We tend to have marketing backgrounds, account management. If you're really good at it, I think it could be a path towards ownership. Now, I
Mhm.
see that because I myself have been in that account management role and I enjoyed it when I was doing it. And it gave me good insight into what owning an agency could look like. What was it like for you as an account manager? What inklings did you have of what ownership could potentially look like at that time?
It was scary to me. It was about having a lot of money, moving with a lot of money, managing a lot of money. That's what I saw it as, like, and I think, again, coming back to my experience being a child of immigrants, it was about earning money, managing money, and I just thought owning a business meant more of that. I was very naive to this world of business ownership. When you're an employee, for that better part, I was a freelancer, yes, for a couple of years in broadcast television, but for the most part in my professional career up until that point, I was an employee. I was getting a solid paycheck every 2 weeks. I didn't worry about cash flow. I didn't have to worry about who was paying their invoices on time and who wasn't. It just wasn't something I ever considered. So when I started thinking about ownership, I was really caught up in the finances of it all, truly. Because up until that point, like I had worked myself up to VP, and I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. So I was managing the relationships, I was managing the business. I knew how to make the money, I knew how to bring it in, I knew how to get everything going, I knew how to meet the KPIs and drive the results.
I think what you're highlighting is the responsibility that comes in account management, where you are responsible for a portfolio of clients. There's money that you're responsible for coming in, the relationship you're responsible for. And so, in many ways, there's kind of this foundation that's being built. Even though you might not recognize that you could be an owner of an agency, I think there are things there that pop up that if you really enjoy and can see yourself eventually being responsible for, could mean that, hey, perhaps this could be a path for you for ownership. Now, that being said, you didn't see that right away. And I want to get into that. What helped you see the possibility? How did it come to your mind that, wow, maybe I could own an agency?
I still think I'm trying to believe it, in all honesty. But at the time, it was Donnelly Langton, the former owner, the namesake of the company, Donnelly Langton. She didn't have any children, but she knew that she wanted to pass off the agency to someone trusted. We had very intimate conversations and we became really good friends over time, and she was a mentor too. And I knew that she saw me as somebody who can help build and create more at the agency. She had told me that other than herself, I was the only other one to ever bring business to the agency. And I think she saw opportunity there. And you know what? Really, it was in her soft persistence. I say soft because she never forced me. She just made me believe over time. She never pushed more than she could, or she never stepped over a boundary. It was a gentle reminder that I actually had business acumen and business skill because I didn't think I did. She neatly described my skill set back to me. And I think I wasn't even paying attention to it. I was so relationship forward. I was so friendship forward. I have to like my clients. I need to want to meet your children and know what you had for dinner and where you're going for vacation and share pics while we're away. I need that. I'm fueled by relationships. So I think I was so busy managing relationships that I didn't see the business part of everything. So she made me see it. And over time, she made me believe it. And I think as I took more of a senior leadership role and I started becoming responsible for people and they started seeing me as a mentor and a guide, I slowly started to understand what she was seeing. At the time that I accepted the ownership, I still don't think I fully believed it, but I said, okay, the universe has brought this abundant opportunity to me multiple times because I did refuse Donnelly once or twice. And simply not because I didn't want it, I think she could see that it was coming from a place I don't think I can do it. And she stayed really persistent there. And I think when I took it, I said, okay, let's give it a shot and let's see what happens. Here we go. And that's kind of still my mentality about it. I think that what kind of helps me not get burnt out from PR because agency life is not for everybody. But I'm like, okay, let's just go with the flow and let's see what happens.
I know as we're talking it through, it may sound like it went from identifying you as an account manager with a lot of potential and identifying signals. So some of the signals I hear you say is you were interested in growing the business because you brought business in. You were very relationship forward. You were very intent on making sure that the team was taken care of. So there were these core things that were there for her to see.
Yeah.
I'm sure seeing them didn't happen over a month or 2 months. What was this trajectory? Was it a couple years?
I was hired in 2017, right at the top of the year. So right after the new year, I came into the office in 2017. By fall of 2019, I remember it was October 2019, I had signed my contract for VP. And if I look back at those 2.5 years, they felt like 10 years because she had entered in such a pivotal phase in that years. There were some really key namesake clients that were now moving on to other agencies after being at the company for 10, 12 years. It's very rare to have that these days, right? So she was not only facing a shift in clientele, but then also the staff that she had with her between 10 to 12 years were now seeing themselves in other phases in their life. So she was going through the upheaval on both ends of the spectrum with the company. So I think it opened her up to see me and my talents. And you create a problem, I'm there to solve it. So I was there in the fire of it all. And I was motivated to help her see results. Like, I wanted her to be happy. She was my boss at that time. I wanted to produce results. I wanted to make that sale. I wanted to get the client. I wanted to achieve the KPI. I wanted to make her happy. And I think I saw her going through this transition. And I think she was also relying on me because, she had run a successful company for over 20 years at that point, right? She's new to this transition into the digital world and in content creation. I was living it to a certain extent and still transitioning. So I knew she was relying on me for that lived experience. But together, the agency was changing. And I think 5 months into my job there, everybody who was there had moved on. So I was now the most senior one there by default. And I think I took it upon myself as a challenge. Hey, I'm here. Let's make the most of it. I'm happy to have a full-time job right now because, we were kind of laid off and moved on from the broadcast world. And I wanted to do her good and I wanted to make her proud. And I think in that journey, she was able to see what I was able to bring to the table, and I was able to find the areas where I was enjoying the work.
Mhm.
And I built really good friendships with the clients at that time too.
I love hearing that you had the heart to really step in and do a great job, not just a good job, but a great job. It sounds like there was succession planning involved. In 2 years, you had learned the ropes, you had KPIs that you were meeting and exceeding. And then the next step was the VP role. So you stepped into the VP role. Was there ever a point where she sat you down and said, okay, here's kind of what I'm thinking. Here are the steps of owning the agency. Was there any of that type of succession planning done with you, or was it more organic?
I think it was a blend of both. I've never actually had this conversation with Dorothy, so it's pretty interesting on what she was thinking for herself and what led her to ask me and how she was approaching it. She was very transparent with what she was thinking about. So I'd say one, My journey to VP, I think, was quite natural. I think at that time, as we were growing, it just was the most natural step, you know? Also, Donnelly was living in the West Coast. She was in Vancouver and back to Toronto, back and forth. So she really needed someone to trust with the team and the office and keep things moving forward. So I think naturally, me stepping into that leadership role made sense. I thought VP was the highest I was going to reach. I was like, okay, this is a stretch. Let me go with it. You know, it was lovely. She believed I could do it. I signed on the dotted line. At that time, you know, I was having some stakes in the company too. So, you know, there was, and I think she also knew that because I was working like it was my company. And I've always said that. Like, my parents taught me that work ethic too. You work like it's your company so your boss could be happy. So I did a lot of that. And I think she saw that and she's like, you know, let's give you some ownership into the company. Let's give you some, you know, shares so you feel valued and you feel invested in the growth of what's happening here. And it was a wonderful move on her part. People can say it was business, people can say it was strategy. I think what she was doing is, hey, here's a piece of the cake too. It was fair, you know? It made me feel valued. We loved it. I would say that's the most succession planning there was at that time. Shortly after I became VP, I think she was now thinking about the next phase in her life. She wanted to move to retirement. She didn't really, I don't know if there were offers for sale earlier. I don't know that trajectory, but she knew that I could young up the agency. Langton had its name in traditional media. It was now still around, had relevant clients. It was still transitioning with the times. She knew I could, you know, young it up and bring it into more relevancy. She wanted to see that. She knew there was opportunity to earn more and achieve more and do more. But she also knew, and I think it was so good that she didn't have an ego about it. She knew that if it was going to have legs beyond a certain point, she wasn't going to be involved in it. But I think she saw the natural passion I had for the space and what I was able to do. And she was like, this is your chance. Like, this is your opportunity to be given the opportunities I had created for myself. And she did as a woman. She created these opportunities for herself. And she created that opportunity for me. And I'm grateful for it. And I think if I go back and look at it, I don't know if I would ever have started my own company. I don't know if I had that sort of vision, but I know I have the entrepreneurial spirit. So I knew that I could take something and make it better. I knew that if you gave me a cup, I would make it the most fashionable, sellable piece of cup. And I had to really realize that that was my strength and I could take the agency from point A to point B. And I think she saw that too, yeah.
Yeah, a sign of a really great mentor, able to see all those things in you that you haven't yet seen in yourself. And then she really valued you because she took the step first of giving you a stake in the business. And sure, some could say that it was a great business move, but it requires a lot of trust
Yes.
from an owner to give someone stake in a business. So it was a sign of trust. And I think that is really important if you're thinking about transitioning someone in your business. Granted, you see the potential in them for ownership, that there has to be that trust, and that trust equals a stake in the business.
Yes, yes. And to come back to your question, though, shortly after I became VP, she did sit me down and ask if I would be interested. And I think that was the first time where I was like, I never thought of it. I don't think I can give you what you're looking for. I don't think I'd be able to do things beyond a certain point. And this was actually, she had mentioned it a couple of times, and then she sat me down. And it was the most casual conversation. It was never this formal thing. And I said, you know what? The more and more I think about this, I said, like, can I give you what you deserve as a partner? Can I do justice to this? I don't know if I can. I don't know if I've been around long enough. I don't know if I've done enough of this. I don't know if I personally believe I can do it. I'm scared about it, you know? And that was my way of saying no without saying no. And she took that back. And then she came back and she's like, okay, but what if we made you partner with shares? Like she went back and I think she understood what I was thinking about myself and where I was in my life and what I was thinking about my money and my purpose and what I wanted to do with my career. And she took that back and she said, okay, how can I make this more valuable to Daniel so he could see an opportunity here? And I thought only very special kind of people would do that. I think most people would have just said the no and gone to the next person, you know, or would have done it for like a big paycheck and got more zeros or something. She really came to me out of potential and hope and passion and opportunity. And I'm so grateful for that because you don't get that everywhere.
I hear that And immediately my brain goes to, she nurtured you.
Yes.
You had said no, and you're absolutely right. She could have taken that no and be like, well, that's done. But instead, she thought about where you were at, what might be a barrier for you, and she opened the next door for you instead of asking you to make the big leap right away. And that was important because it's almost like leap pads. If you're on a pond, there's these leap pads, and you have to take a leap pad to get across the pond, but there's multiple leap pads. It may have been that she presented you the last leap pad and she realized, wait, gotta back it up. What's the first leap pad here? What's the second leap pad? And so it felt like she really thought about that and honored that path. And by doing that, she paved a road for you to be here right now.
Yes. And I think when we describe it as leap pads, it's like I want to say it was very organic. Like we were both sitting in a pond. The pond is the agency. We're in the water. And she's if I'm gonna grow and get out of this pond. She knew I needed to get onto the lead pad. And so that's how organically it happened. I really don't know. Adonali always worked with heart and she worked with dedication and she really believed in me. And I think she never forced me to believe in myself. She let it happen naturally. And I think the leap pad is the most beautiful example because it really did happen organically in real time. I don't even think it was a strategy on her end. I think retiring comfortably and seeing the agency beyond her was definitely her goal.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever thought it would come in the form of me. I think she probably thought it would have been in the form of a sale. But she was flexible enough in her thinking and present enough to be like, hey, let's pivot this. Maybe this can be something different. That was her business acumen. She was smart. But I also think it's so important. We've referred to her as a mentor throughout this entire thing. And she was, but she never staked claim as a mentor. And I think that's what was the best thing. She wasn't like, let me hold your hand and guide you and teach you how to do this. She never did. She let me live my life. She let me feel what I needed to feel. She let me understand what I needed to understand. And she just gently guided the way. She never said, I'm going to be your mentor. This is who I'm going to be. Listen to me. She never did any of that. And you know, there's a lot of mentors out there who work out of that place of ego and they want the satisfaction of being your mentor. She never did that. I should ask her about that, but I never did ask her, but she never did that. She just kind of nudged and guided along.
That's amazing. I call that true stewardship.
Yeah.
She was just present in the moments that were available to her, and she stewarded those moments for your benefit. She looked at what you needed and helped you along the way. And it so happened that it also started to align with the direction that she wanted. And I think that's true leadership. Leadership is quiet. It's putting the people that you lead in front of you, putting them first. And sometimes as a leader, things turn out the way you think they're going to turn out, and things turn out the way you never imagined, and sometimes not in a good way either.
Don't I know this now? So
Right? And that's leadership. You make strategic bets, so to speak, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But most of it is about helping others improve
yes, and
believe in themselves. Absolutely. And you're now in that leadership space. So before we even get into talking about your leadership, you've spoken about self-doubt, especially as a person of color stepping into ownership. What did that internal transition look like for you?
I'll be very honest with you. I think that transition is still underway. And I want to be able to be honest and say that I think it will always be underway to a certain. I think, 41 years old. I've been on this world as a plus-sized gay South Asian for a very long time. And I think you cannot underestimate how ingrained certain beliefs and experiences get and how they can really sort of infiltrate your journey of growth. I'm still trying to believe this. And I almost think it's a healthy thing, so I'm not sitting here with like complete imposter syndrome to the point where I'm not realizing what's happening. But there's a fear in me that I'm trying to mitigate. And then there's the actual experience of not fully feeling like I have everything I need to be here. Like I'm still learning it. So I'm being very honest about that and I'm putting my best foot forward. And I'm very transparent with my team and my clients to the most part. They know that I'm doing this and I'm doing it with heart and passion and I'm learning it along the way. But I think the part of me that has a little bit of fear and worry is that I don't ever want it to get to my head, And I think a lot of me is feeling that way just coming out of being in entertainment journalism for a very long time. You see superstardom, you see celebrities, you see the way people fawn for them and idolize them. And you also see when someone believes themselves a little too much, like I won't take names, but you see what kind of happens? And I just want to be so present in this journey and vulnerable throughout the entire process that people can see themselves in this journey maybe, and then inspire themselves to take a leap of faith too, even though they don't really know it in the moment or believe it. I'm here because I took a leap of faith. I'm here because I chose to believe and see what someone saw in me and be empowered by it. Then I realized that I also believe that about myself. In other parts of my life, I didn't allow myself to see it in business. And then it allowed me to be vulnerable enough to be like, okay, I don't kind of know what I'm doing here, but I'll figure it out. And then it allowed me to open the door to others with the same experience too. Am I the best CEO? Probably not. But am I going to be one of the most relatable? Yes, because it is a journey, like there's a single mom out there raising 3 kids in a house. That's not being a CEO in a certain way, managing the finances. I'm just doing it for a company. There's a single dad experiencing it. There's somebody who's migrated to this country, no family around, earning minimum wage, trying to make it happen. They're the CEO of their own life. Like, we're all facing the same thing on a different scale. Like, I'm no better than somebody else just because I'm in probably a more visible platform. I just remind myself of that. And it humbles me and it makes me understand that I'm not better than the next person. I definitely will celebrate my wins if it's not crazy enough at the agency where I'm allowed to just have a moment to myself. But I just don't think I'm better than the next person. And I think everybody can have this opportunity. And I always want to remind myself of that because I do want to be grateful for what was given to me, because I do know that this relationship with Donnelly is unique. I do know that it's a gem of a situation that landed in my lap, and I'm here as a result. And most importantly, I mean, whoever thought a PR firm could give me the platform to talk about these things, about being a person of, like, who would have ever thunk? You go to a podcast or a TV show or a blog or your social feeds. I'm doing it through a PR platform, like a PR agency. Like, how special is that? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think leadership is not a final destination. We don't step into leadership and then say, oh, it's done. We're a leader now. And what you express is that leadership in itself is continual learning, and it's continually being present for people. It's not this part where you put on the leadership hat and say, I'm the leader, I know it all. Because the thing about leadership is you don't know it all. And I think when you get to the point where you realize as a leader, you don't know it all and you're willing to explore what you don't know, that makes you an even better leader. I want to say that because it's very much like you just said, it's easy to have imposter syndrome when you're in the leadership space. But as long as you're continually exploring what leadership means, being honest about what you don't know, and then seeking the answers, I think that makes for a great leader. Now, with your team, what are some key things you think help your team right now in the work that they do and how they show up for their clients?
My team is, I would say, for the most part, like, Gen Z. You know, and it's a very different generation because I think they're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to see the the not so great side of certain situations, but to motivate them to feel empowered about themselves, I think it takes a little bit more time. There's a certain sense of resiliency I think our parents' generation had and the generations before them. And I'm a millennial. There's a certain level of resiliency we had too. Our sort of self awareness and awakening came later and we balanced both worlds. I think Gen Z, though, has that self awareness. But I think it almost becomes challenging for them with so much self awareness. Well, okay, what do I do with what I know about my experience? So I feel that when they walk through the door, they're coming in with all of this. Like, they're not just coming in to be the next best publicist. They're bringing the heaviness of the world and their experience and who they are and what they want to do. So I try to create space for that because you can't always separate church and state. And with this generation, there's no separation. Like, you're trying to show up authentically at work, and you're trying to make sure that your work fuels your personal purpose after hours too, to a certain extent. So I create space for that. If they feel challenged, talk about it. Sometimes they need to cry, let it out. Like, they get onto a call with me or in person, I'm like, just let it out. Here's a tissue. Just pour out all those tears. Tell me why you're frustrated. Tell me what's going on. And it's never usually about work. It's just something happening at work that's triggered a personal experience that they are finding challenging in the moment. But I try to coach and mentor in that space. And I think my leadership is just kind of meeting them where they at and just understanding that, work becomes life and life becomes work at sometimes. And I just try to help them navigate that experience and feel good doing it. You know, that's my leadership style. I'm not trying to preach a bunch of stuff that might not make sense to you right now, right? But I can definitely show the way and we can gradually get there. And now that I'm talking about it, if you think about it, I think this is exactly what Donnelly did with me. And I think when I look back at her mentorship style, there was agency and there was space and freedom to do what you needed to do and a lot of autonomy. And I offer that to all my staff because I flourished under that. And I want them to see that too and flourish just as much.
It's the greatest sign of honor when you replicate the leadership you had because it was so effective and you're using what was shown to you to better lead your team now. Here's where I want to take the conversation. Now, I want to switch back to the idea of internal succession. And I don't want to put you on the spot and ask about, have you thought about internal succession for your agency? I don't want to do that. But I do want to ask, most agency owners, when they think about exiting, they think about an outside buyer. Of course, your story is very different. What do you think agency owners are missing when they don't consider internal succession?
There isn't one way of doing things and there's different ways of working together. I think one of the best things about the PR space right now is community and partnership. Those two things have infiltrated the way we do work and work with each other so much, not just internally but externally, with our brands, with content creators, with other media partners, amongst each other. And I think, why not apply that to business? I'm the perfect example of that. Somebody thought of a different way of doing things, Donnelly, and she applied it and it's worked. So I think that's the best way for her to have led me into this because now I see that there could be multiple different avenues for me to, create internal succession. But I think there's always different ways of working with each other and we shouldn't discount that. She was able to discover it with me. I was able to see it and accept it and, move forward with it. And it could find me in a different way too. I've actually recently had conversations with another PR owner too, and one of the things she said to me is like there's different ways of working with one another. And that drew me to her because I was like, okay, she's coming in with the same energy that allowed me to exist here. So she's definitely a relationship I would like to foster.
If exiting is part of the plan, it's important to look at all different options. And it may seem like the outside buyer is the easier option. And having internal succession may feel like such an uphill ride. Most agencies, when they're thinking of an exit, most of them will not get an external buyer. Internal succession is an opportunity that is undervalued, underplayed. I also think that internal succession means the business owner has to want to lead well, because you have to really lead well in order to nurture someone into that space. So my thoughts on internal succession is that it is worth the time and it is worth the energy if you want to exit, but also if you want to lead well. That's where I see internal succession as not just, like you said, a strategy for selling the business, but a method of leading well and ensuring that your agency is honoring the clients, ensuring that your agency is growing. All of that requires you to lead well. But if you do that, if you think about internal succession as simply that, I think you win.
Yeah, that's very beautifully put. Yeah.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, one last question. What does success look like to you now compared to earlier in your career?
I think success earlier to me was earning a paycheck, finding financial stability, kind of living that sort of satisfied 9 to 5. And for argument's sake, us millennials, older millennials, we were definitely taught to be in that trajectory. I think now success to me is feeling good about what I'm doing and being content in the moment because once you own an agency, it is a daily process. You've got ups and downs. You've lived a whole year in one week, right? So I just want to be content with the decisions that I'm making. I want to feel good about what's happening. And I want to give myself the space to think and feel. And because I'm happier when I do that. And when I'm happier, I feel successful because I believe in more. When I don't feel happy, and I feel challenged, then I'm not seeing my success. I'm only seeing the downside to everything, you know? So that to me is what success is right now. That could also be me being in my 40s. I don't know. But I just think it's about living a happy and a content life. And also working with my staff and not just trying to mentor them along. Like, okay, what's going on? Like, what's your thought process here? Describe it to me. You know, okay, well, how are you feeling? And when you're in this position as me, you know what's happening. You know, you just have to allow the time. And I find that I'm happier when I give that space to my staff too. If they feel successful, then I feel successful. You know, if one of my managers walks away feeling like they can do this and it felt like a challenge earlier, then I've succeeded for that day. That's what success looks like to me right now.
I am so thrilled we had this conversation. Daniel, if someone wanted to find you, where would be the best place to do that?
You can do that on Instagram, Daniel.Pillai. I'm Queen HBIC on TikTok. I think those are the two best places where you can communicate with me and find me.
Amazing. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me at the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app and share it with a friend. I'll see you on the next one.